longer a weakness. They feel better about it because they feel confident enough on something they need to know.
Oh, let's go. Party time.
It's a whole continuum, and every single preference is on that continuum.
Adjust their chin angle down so they can perceive the ball up a little bit more.
All right, welcome back. Another episode. Excited to get started, excited to be back. Me and Matt, as you guys can see, we are in the same location. We're on the road together. So we just started our road trip. We're on a good bit of a trip right now for the next 2 months. We have about 12 trips right now. So we're doing a little bit of traveling. We'll see if we get sick of each other, but we'll see. How are you guys doing?
Good, feeling good.
Doing good. Finally settled and carry, so we're good.
Love it. Love it. So let's get into it. So like I said, we've been traveling around. We're working with the program last week. Awesome. It's always fun to be able to do it. Spent the last 2 years for me doing it with David, and now getting to spend some more time with Matt on the road is a bunch of fun. And I think what's always cool is the ability to see so many players in such a short time. You're seeing 25 plus players during a trip, and you just get to see so many unique movements, so many unique personalities and backgrounds that you don't typically get to see. And you get to learn a lot just by watching how people are interacting. I think that's one of the best parts of it. We always talk about being able to observe is such a strong trait and skill. So this was your first trip. You want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, I think it was super, super cool to, see all these athletes coming from, especially now in day and age, so many different walks of life, some coming from high school, some coming from the transfer portal from different universities, and some who have been in the same program throughout their whole career, and kind of seeing, different things that they've taken from different experiences they had, and then also, why they ended up in the place they ended up with. And, we had a bunch of fun, like talking to them about things other than, the sport that they're playing. So it was a really cool time. My favorite is just to interact with the players and, interact with the coaches and learn from them and understand where their mind is at, and, use that context and information to, ultimately, hopefully help them to be 1% better. Obviously, some cases, potentially maybe be more, but, just try to help them in any way, shape, or form to have a better career and a better experience. And I think that's, why we're all here, is just to help the player and help the coach and help that experience and give them, the experience, me selfishly, that I had. And I can't, thank, my coaches enough and the experiences I had across my college career, and just want to pass that on to as many people as possible. So super cool to be, on, this was, I think I went on a couple last year, and, really starting off the road trip, with a great university this year, and, excited to keep that rolling over the next 2 months, and meet a bunch of more awesome athletes as well as coaches too.
So
Yeah, hold on. I think that's really cool because it's a good point of what I really learned from David early on was being observable. But I don't think you can be observable unless you're some form of a clinician, right? You can't sit behind a computer and just collect data or see certain videos or whatever. You have to be observable in the room. You have to be a clinician. You have to have that experience, no matter what you're doing, whether it's hitting or pitching or actually doing the motor preferences assessments. So that's something I learned early on from him, was trying to avoid that judgment, which us Americans are so good at, of being just judgmental or going in with certain cognitive bias and being observable. So that comes with being a clinician and the time spent. So I think those are always the most unique experiences, and the most fun part is you're actually in there with the athletes, but you're also seeing different environments and a lot of different context, which actually is like where you learn the most. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Nick. I just thought it was important. That was one of the very first things that David taught me, um, was trying to be more observable with less judgment, which is the opposite of how most coaches in America, or maybe our culture a little bit, is just to want to fix, right? Fix very fast because that's how we are. So sorry, I just wanted to add that
oh
point in
no.
there.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's actually a great transition into like kind of the theme of this month's episode and what we have planned today. And we'll get into it with David and just kind of talk about the impacts of environment that it has on players, on profiles, and how it impacts movement as a whole.
I'll let David take that one.
Oh, take that one.
No, you take it.
I take it.
Yeah.
Well, actually, your AMPs are kind of constrained by your native environment. So you have to actually understand that first. Uh, during the pregnancy, actually the whole aDNA and your whole structure is learning from the previous genetic information from your mother, your grandmother, etc., etc. I mean, gravity on Earth is not equal everywhere, so it's different. Like people that are living at, let's say, 4,000 feet doesn't have the same constraint that people that are living near the sea. So actually, your body is learning, is actually developing initially just to survive into is this environment. And now we're moving, like we are in modern society and everybody's moving away from actually where most of us have been born and raised. So I'm the best example. I'm like 8,000 miles kilometers away from home, and I used to live in the mountains, so now I'm like low level. But so the body can adapt. Actually, it's going to take some, maybe some generations. The best example that I can give you is if you put, let's say, someone with white with red hair in a desert, and you put him side by side with someone with that brown skin, and I'm asking you which one's going to burn first. It's got a sunburnt. How do you say that?
Mhm.
So the white is going to probably get burned quicker. Now, in 10 generations, that might be equal. So it's just a matter of this. Just you have to understand that the genetic just wants us to survive at our own best. So that's the first thing we have to consider is where you're coming from. That's why when we assess a player, we always ask like, where you're coming from, what is your history? We want to learn more because it can explain a lot of things. Like if someone is coming from Asia, we know that 70% of the population over there is more terrestrial. So that can give us some information like, oh, you have some Asian DNA and now you have flat feet. Oh, that start to make sense. So that's all those information that are very important. Then you're coming to nowadays context with players, let's say a freshman in college with all the stress. And I have seen that for last 4 years with the Terps. The kids are like overwhelmed by the stress. Everything is new, and probably so you're going to be able to talk more about that. But it's almost like a new world for them, and new relation and new constraints, and the body has to, and the brain, not only the body but the brain too, has to adapt to understand what's going on. So these things can actually bring some specific movement or reaction into your body that puts you away from what you are. So those are the things that people are really to understand is we understand where we're coming from, where the athlete is coming from, but we need also to understand where is he now and where he wants to go. Because if you don't align those three things, you will never get the best results. So it's really a matter of alignment between where you coming from, where you are at now, and where you want to go. Like I'm talking often during clinics, like I'm 53 years old. I'm not really in good shape. Like I'm still training myself, but not that much. But if I'm going to see someone, a coach, and tell him, hey, I want to run the next New York Marathon, which is let's say in 3 months, the first reaction of the coach should be like, there's no way, maybe next year, but it's too short. So my desire doesn't align with my current reality or my current context. So I have to either adapt myself or like push back a little bit my goal, but it's everything is there. So maybe I'll be able to run the New York Marathon in 5 years because it's going to take me 5 years to train myself to get there. But it's an alignment between again your past, your present, your goals, and how the coach can help you to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And one thing you brought up was, the stresses that, you have as a freshman. It's a new environment, different place. There's new people around. You're not sure of the expectations. And it just makes me think right away of we talk a lot, or Swope talks a lot about the differences between, hitting in the cage and then hitting outside, right? It's another environmental aspect of things. And Swope, just talk about the differences and the impacts that the environment has between and what you guys do in terms of, I know you'll stay inside for the early work maybe, and then you guys will switch and you go outside and be able to get different environments and different focus depending on where you guys are hitting.
Yeah, I mean, well, stimulus is a huge key, right? I mean, when we're talking about competition and stimulus and all that. So, what we try to do is one with MP, it's changed my whole mind frame of we're actually trying to adapt. Um, we're trying to adapt their motor preferences to baseball, right? We're not saying, hey, you're just coming in to hit Matt Swope's way or another coach way or do it like this, right? We're actually trying to adapt the game to them, right? Which helps all these things. But you have to have some onboarding as far as freedom in the cage to try things, or maybe it's, whether it's constraints or other things or cues, you have to have that kind of freedom of learning or play that children kind of go through. And I think that's a good environment for inside the cage. And then what you're trying to do is see if what you're doing by adapting to them once you go outside in the stimulus and see if that's something they can handle. And I think most coaches do the opposite. They try to build a culture of like, this is how we do things, and then just expect them to have that fall in line on the field and in competition, but it doesn't, right? And in the current landscape of sports is now they just get rid of those guys, right? If they don't work or fall in line. So where does really the measurement of development come in these days? Like how can you actually quantifiably say we develop, or what do you do? And that's really hard with all the pressure and money, and you'll get a lot of different opinions on that. But no, for us, it's really trying to adapt to what they do well. And I think it's an important question. How many coaches really ask a players when they come in is what's important to you? And just what's important to you. And you'd be shocked at how many kids just really can't even answer that basic question, right? And because for so long, whether it's a facility or they've been so regimented, they're just going, going, going. There isn't any self-reflection or them understanding who they are. So sometimes it's important to dial it back and just understand who the player is, which is goes back to everything MP started with, and being observable and asking what's important to you. What are you good at? Okay. And what do you want to do? And that's a different way of saying what he said earlier, but it's the same thing. So I think a lot of it is changing the mind frame of adapting to the player, not trying to set certain goals or parameters or constraints that don't allow certain players to be successful.
You know what is funny is about like I've learned recently, like when you ask people how is growing your life nowadays, per se, 80% of them will tell you what they don't like in life. And actually only 10% of the people will tell you like, oh, the life I have is perfect and I love doing this and that. And you got another 10% that are like in between. So we are in a culture or in a system where actually it's kind of a normality to not like what you are doing because you got some pressure on yourself and this pressure takes over yourself. When actually those 10% that liked what they're doing most part of the time, they are the best leaders in the world.
100%. I think the self-reflection, that you both brought up is so hyper important, and it kind of relates to the mental capacity of the athlete. And you start to see that there are so many athletes out there that have the talent to succeed and perform, but the ones who really go far in the sport or, really enjoy what they do, they have the mental capacity to take what's ever thrown at them. Like they're very level-headed, they can handle information, they can be their best self-coach, and they can go from there. So just taking that self-reflection and kind of taking a step back and looking at, okay, what are my goals here? What am I trying to do? What is important to me, rather than just, thinking, hey, I'm working hard, I'm showing up to the field every day, and then I'm just doing what's asked of me. Like, no, like what's important to you? Take that self-reflection, and you start to see that people become a lot more, level-headed and be able to handle this different stresses and information that's thrown at them. I think that was a huge, importance for me in my career, and really knowing like what my priorities were. And, when I dialed it back and, found that my priorities, were to be a good teammate and, were to win, like those were my main two. Like the failures and the successes of the game, obviously we all wanted to succeed, but I ended up being way more fulfilled playing the game because I knew that, my teammates and I had a strong bond, and I knew that we were winning games. So to have that time to take that self-reflection and understand that that's good for you.
Yeah, I think you got to be resilient, and so the problem with today's society, we can get into the weeds on all this stuff, but with social media and stuff, I feel like today's athlete or players or people in general are always comparing, and you don't have the ability to even be resilient if you're consistently comparing yourself to others. So I think that's something in my as a head coach at Maryland or even with the MP is it's just consistently on the internet or comparing ourselves to other and you don't have the ability to be resilient and do what it takes to get better. So all good points, but yeah.
One example of that happened literally this week is, two of my best friends are fortunate enough to still, play right now, and one's in double A and one's in the big leagues. And, they were going back and forth, and I was talking with both of them, and, they were kind of having a back and forth. And, the one who was in double A asked, the one who was in the show, like, what's the difference between, double A to triple A to the big leagues? And, it really actually came down to environment. Like, the pitching, the talent is very similar. Obviously, there's going to be some more talent at the big league level, but from a depth perspective and in the type of stuff you're seeing and the velocity you're seeing, like it's not too different. Like your day-to-day routine is very similar, but the environment is different. The amount of fans that are at the game, the amount of pressure that is on you, the media that is covering you, like the whole environment is really different, but the game is very simple. And it made me think about one of my favorite movies, The Hoosiers, when they go into that, this big arena for the first time, and they put one of their players, I forget the name of the player, on their shoulders, and they go and measure the height of the rim, and they're like, yep, 10 inches, just like, or 10 feet, just like it was, back at our gym and home, and just really understanding that, environment can influence your feelings and how you feel and the overwhelmingness. So just a really cool note that related to that this week that came up, within my own personal conversations with my friends.
Yeah, just as we're talking more and more about environment, it just makes me think of like another layer of preferences. And David, talk to the differences and kind of how personality plays into it when it first comes into environment. Like we talk a lot about introversion and extroversion and where you get your energy source from. So let's start there and talk a little bit about how personality kind of impacts and or how environment impacts your personality and vice versa.
So let's say to make it simple, we know that what we call introvert people, they are not shy. It's not that. It's about you getting your energy from yourself. And those people actually, I think that everybody knows a former teammate or current teammate that actually wants to be seated at the end of the bench and doesn't want anybody like, don't leave me alone. When I'm competing, leave me alone. I don't want nobody to talk to me. And so it's probably feasible at the low level, but when you're in the major leagues, I don't know how those guys can handle that because it's so noisy around. You got, as you just mentioned, you got the media, you got everybody else. So I think that more you know yourself, better you can handle that. But that could probably explain why some people struggle at some point, growing up into, different levels. It's just because actually you don't know how to react to this context or what's happening around you. And when you don't know how to deal with it, well, it's just becoming a constraint. So it can, and actually your brain cannot manage everything. And your brain just wants one thing is to protect yourself and make sure you can survive. So it's going to put some energy on something to help you, maybe to fight the context that you don't like, but this energy there cannot be transferred to the performance. So now you're going to have a performance drop because again, your brain wants to survive and your body wants to survive at its best. So, I mean, the personalities most part of the time can help you because that's the goal. But I can tell you many stories of players that are very good, even in some friends outside of baseball that actually they cannot evolve in life just because actually they are stuck into their personalities. They don't know it, and actually they cannot adapt. They cannot make any change in their life. I got to talk with a friend yesterday, and I told her, "Hey, can you just project yourself in 10 years and tell me where you want to be?" She's 50 years old, like she's going to be 60 in 10 years, right? She has like no really good background, whatever. And she told me like her only answer was, I don't know, I cannot do that. So as a friend, my goal was like, okay, let's tweak that. I give you in my witch how do you call that? Stick? That's my
Wand.
son give me this,
Your
okay?
wand is that your witch wand over there?
That's my witch. I got my Lego witch. Don't come give me that.
The
So
wand, the
I just
wand.
told her, hey, I'll give you my witch stick, and if you can change your daily life today, Just tell me what you will change, what you will keep. And now we start from there. And she gave back to me and said, "Now that's easy. Now we know I know she's a terrestrial. There's no way for her to get 10 years ahead. There's no way." Now telling her, "Hey, you got a magic stick and you can change now." So now she's more in the present time. She's going to use her past experience to understand what her life should look like, which one she will enjoy, and now we'll be able actually to work together and give her steps day after day, week after week, month after month, on and stuff to work on to improve her life and make sure she's going to be safe in 10 years. Well, that's the exact same thing with an athlete. So you have to understand, like, this is where actually the personality is very important, is because you need to know where you're good at, where you're kind of not good at, and actually how you can deal with it. But there's always solutions. But if you're not aware of it, now your personality can become a nightmare at one point.
Well, I mean, I think too, like as a coach, you need to know your players, right? So most of the time, again, we've talked about this on the first two episodes, it's time, right? And all we used to do was trial and error and time. Contextually, it's nice to know, hey, he's introverted. All right, so he needs to be quiet, or maybe let him bring his music and go down and end, and you know that, and it's not an issue with how they compete because you're understanding how that person competes instead of judging it, right? Different from maybe how you would compete. It could be even meditations, right? From a terrestrial and aerial. Maybe an aerial does better with a walking meditation, or, where a terrestrial does better with actually like a sound bath or a guided meditation where he's seated, right? These are all things that generally can give you an idea how the person can then add that into their process, right? And I think that's the cool part about MP is when you're trying to have them own their process or be their own best coach. These are things that you're helping them learn, but they're going to find themselves and find their way. And we said it again in the first two episodes. A lot of times it's just being like, it's okay. Like this is okay. Like this doesn't mean something's wrong with you because as an athlete in America, your whole life you've only been told what you do wrong or what you need to fix, right? And that's a problem systemically, but this cuts down so much time and actually gives you a better relationship with your players because you're meeting them halfway, but you're also having them be good and their best self. So it's a win-win for everybody, really. So the introvert and the extrovert thing, just being transparent at the very beginning, I automatically assumed it had to do with, hey, you're extroverted, you're a great conversationalist, right? Like that was, and it's like, no, it really is a big portion of it is where you get your energy from, right? Um, and so, if you can teach a kid that's introverted, it was like, hey, there's going to be a ton of stimulus once you get to the ballpark and you can learn your process and find pockets of what you need to do. But maybe it needs to be you need to take a nap during the day, or you need to meditate quietly somewhere, or you need to have this version of music. And like these are all things that really could be game changers. Instead, again, you don't have time in the college or pro level or when you're trying to compete to have all this trial and error, what works, and like, oh, that start worked, so I'm going to do this again, or this to start didn't work, or because then you're just tying all the results to your process instead of really truly understanding who you are. So hopefully that was a way like he did a great job from a 50,000 foot view, but like a day to day how you can apply it, in an organization or for one of your players, it's definitely very, very applicable.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And just like anything with MP, there are so many layers to it. Like even what David said when he's, talking with his friend that is, outside of sports, not trying to implement this in her sport life, but just her life. You can also look at it from a sports lens, like how we communicate with certain type of athletes, with our terrestrials who are building their present from their past. Like now we get into like sport specific cues that are resonating with them. So we talk often like feel your load, talking more big muscles with terrestrials and how they organize their move and building, present cues for them that make sense.
Mhm.
Now, with your aerials that we know are thinking way more in the future, maybe we're thinking about creating speed, or we're talking to them about a result they're trying to achieve, and now we're having targeted cues based on how their mind is operating. So not only can we relate MP to just with friendship and life advice, but then you can also dive really into the nitty gritty into like, yeah, I'm telling a terrestrial feel their load because it helps build their present from their past. So that's where it can get like the layers of the onion can just keep getting peeled and peeled and peeled, and understanding that, as a player, is game changing. because you're right, Swope, like time is everything. And if you have those answers and if you have, what maybe makes sense to you, you can get to what gets you in a groove that much sooner and you can be your best self coach and you can understand the environment that's around you and find ways to adapt to that.
We
Yeah, and that's how I got into it, studying the MBTIs like 7 years ago. But I've also learned in my life I've never really truly been challenged in meetings in my personal relationships until the witch. I mean, he is probably the most aerial guy out there. But what's funny is that the first year I met with him and just seeing the process of how he does things is so drastically different for me, and that's why it's good to have that push and pull from someone that's not you. But then now with another coach that's on my staff, it's very similar where I would have been, you know, more rigid in my way of rationale. Now I'm able to at least take a step back and understand that one through the MBTI, reading it and doing my research, but actually dealing with it in my own personal life almost on a daily basis. So that's been kind of cool to kind of see all those things kind of come full circle once you kind of studied it as well.
yeah.
Sorry, Witch. That wasn't a jab, but getting through the meeting with the witch is an experience in itself.
Hey, you got three terrestrials on this call here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I can compensate.
yeah. He would say that. Yeah, he would say that.
So we
Well,
talked.
I think there's one thing that I just want to add about personality and context, and what Swope has just mentioned a few times is yes, an athlete can perform if you impose him a certain move. Yes. The issue is this performance is gonna relate only on his energy level. And the day that energy level will be low, there will be no performance. So we're creating actually models thinking that anybody can adapt when actually this is true. Anybody can adapt. No worries. But what is the cost? And actually, I think more specifically in college, when you don't have time, I mean, to coach, and actually, if you impose any kind of movement and your player is down because he had exam the week before, whatever, you're losing performance, right? So I think that's something that people don't really understand in the US is like any kind of movement is related on your energy level. And by being into your profile and respecting who you are and what is your personality, how you get your energy from like more what surround you, and actually just helps you to save energy so you can perform better. And what we observe with all the teams we are working with actually is there's a better comprehension of each other. That's something that we will really observe. Like there's no more judgments regarding someone that cannot do something. It's because, oh, we got it. We know why. And now we know it's probably good at something else. Now it comes into the game, the coach's choice and strategy, because he knows actually which player can perform where and when. And normally following the profile and the approach, they should be always ready to perform at their own best.
I think a really good point you just brought up, like David, is understanding the energy levels of your athlete and being less adaptable when you're more tired. And I think a really cool example of that is just thinking about a marathon runner. On mile 3, they still have a lot of energy. They're moving, pretty easily. Like they're still a lot more upright. Like however, they're running more normal. And then when you see them in mile 25, 26, you can see how tired and drained they are. They're a little bit more slumped over, like they're a little bit lower to the ground. And now you stretch that and relate that to what, people are going through in high school, college, and the pros. Like you stretch that over the course of a season and understanding, what was able to be adaptable in that mile 2 or in that game 2 is not going to be as adaptable in that game 150 or that, mile 25. So I just really think it's a cool, life example. Like obviously it's very easy for, us in the US to comprehend, being fresh and then being tired after a short 6-hour marathon. But now you stretch it over the course of a season and what can the body handle? So thought that was a really cool note, that you made, David, and it makes complete sense in terms of, what we're asking these athletes to do and understanding what their body and mind have been through.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about acceptance tank as its own, and the ability to, when you're working through certain balance points or making certain moves, that acceptance tank diminishes quicker, right? So I think one thing that's also interesting is when we can talk about the impact of food. And David is a big advocate for gluten-free. I know that firsthand because I have to order the food, and it's always a challenge for me. So just talk to you with some people and the impact that gluten has on people and other foods like that.
It's so first of all, I'm not a doctor, okay? So I'm not giving any medical advice. First
Witch
thing.
doctor is just a nickname.
That just a nickname. No, what we know now for sure, like I became gluten-free actually to support my wife. Then I didn't need it really, but actually I feel better without gluten, so I keep eating without gluten. So the history behind gluten, just to make it simple. So in the 60s, and there's an article on our website about that. In the 60s, actually, what they call the CNRS, which is a National Scientific Research Center in France, some bread producers reached out to them and told them, "Hey, we want to produce bread faster." So the CNRS start to tweak a little bit the DNA of the seeds to have more gluten. And through the time, what happened is those modifications came up to produce one molecule that actually the body cannot digest right now. So maybe in 50 generation, everybody will be fine, okay? But right now, there's a lot of people in the population that cannot digest that specific molecule into the gluten. That's why you have more and more people that are gluten-free. It's not because it's fun. It's just because actually there were some genetical modification into the DNA of the seed that changed everything. Now, 10 years, I think it's about 10 years ago, the same bread producers are not going back to CNRS and tell them, hey, we need to find out why people are so sick with gluten. When actually they're going to probably modify again to change a little bit the process. So again, there's an adaptation about our body to what we eat, to what we breathe, to what we drink. And actually, if you get back in time, our food was more natural, our hair was clearer, our drink was more maybe water and wine and beer, and that's it. Now you get all those sodas with this. I think I don't want to name it, but that's in one can of sodas, there's 28 pieces of sugar, which is like, you don't do that. And same thing for gluten, that you have to be careful with your athletes because every time you're feeding something to your athletes that he has a hard time to digest, again, the body is going to prioritize digestion instead of performance. So, and we know that we had a team like actually it has been tested for gluten, and 50% of the team was gluten-free. And they feed them with sandwich every day. So we're just losing performance right there. So people are like, yeah, but which diet is the best? I'm going to tell you a very simple answer.
Right.
The one that you digest the best. Simple as this.
Right. How does this relate to, what we're seeing with our teams and how does this all come back to like, why does this matter? And at the end of the day, like, if you have some gluten intolerance and you're eating a gluten sandwich doesn't mean you can't go 3 for 4 with a double. But over time, understanding how we're stacking the odds in our favor in order to be successful and doing more of the right things than more of the wrong things for our own body add up over time. So instead of, I think, as a culture, we have a very hard time, it's easy for us to play devil advocate and be like, well, I'm gluten intolerant. I had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and I still went 2 for 4. Yes, but over a long season or over time throughout your career, like it's like a battery of an iPhone, like you're slowly ticking down that battery. And all we want to do is just stack the odds in our favor to be successful, to ultimately produce on the field, because that is everything that we're concerned about, producing and being pain-free.
And just imagine that because you have your sandwich of peanut butter and jelly every day, you tell me, oh, I'm 3 for 4. Yeah. Imagine without it if you're intolerant. Maybe you
Yeah.
would be 4 for 4. But you will never know because you keep stuck into your own way of living.
There goes the
got
additional perspective.
there you go. There's the Ariel always being more optimistic right there. Yeah, I think
No,
like no,
it's like I got that talk with my wife every almost single day because she told me recently, like, oh my God, we spent so many money into our kids' shoes. We had 3 kids. And I'm like, yeah, we spend a lot of money, very careful with the shoes we purchase for our kids. They never had Crocs or, those kind of shoes. Always good shoes, very expensive. I know sometimes I hit noodles because I didn't have the money, but I pay them good shoes. They don't have any issue. Never been to a chiropractor, never get pain in the back. It's pretty fine. And Nolan is 6'4". He's playing basketball and has never had any issue with his body. So, and actually, he almost grew like a foot in maybe a year or two. So that was crazy. Like we have to change every 3 months the pants because they were too small. But actually, it's fine. So again, there's how we are dealing with our own nature. And I know the society doesn't like me to say that because globally they want to sell their products no matter what. But actually, if you want to perform at your own best, yeah, you have to be careful with what you're doing with your body. I think this is, damn, I forgot his name, the former quarterback from, oh my God, they play at Gillette Stadium. I forgot.
Good old Tom Brady, Patrick
Tom
Mahomes,
Brady. Yeah, Tom Brady was very careful with
just to
his.
go.
Just a goat. Yeah, I saw him play actually, but just forgot it. Like my brain is everywhere. But I know he was very careful with his health.
Yep.
And if you see how much his movement changed through his career, he was actually able to adapt, and he doesn't have that much injuries. So he's a perfect example. Like, and mostly sometimes people are saying to me like, yeah, but it costs more to eat organic or to be careful with. No, it doesn't.
Here's my favorite part to wrap it into. Again, I just got to consistently bring it into like day-to-day teams and organizations is like
Mhm.
one of the most fun parts is to like always challenge the process of what is controllable, right? Because for so many years we didn't know, or before I knew MP, you literally were just going to all these different successful organizations and copying it, right? You were copying protocols, processes, like systems, all that stuff. And I think it's still great to learn from coaches and players, of course, but one of the most fun things for me is trying to create your own process for the athlete and of what you can control. Like, has it ever been part of just the normal process in the nutrition department at school to check for gluten? Has it always been part of the process to check for the right shoes? Has it ever been part of the process to understand where their energy comes from? Like all these answers are pretty much no. As a society, we pay attention to sleep and maybe hydration because that's been around since, the test of time, as something that your parents reiterated. But that's the coolest part for me is to finding these really, really important things that could be major and really impactful for your organization just by challenging and trying to understand like what the process that you can control actually should be. And the problem is most time we take the easy way out of just trying to combine it all, right? And trying to, make it all one thing. And it's just because it saves time. And again, we just keep coming back to that where it never really works out that way.
Yeah, I think what's so cool about MP, we were just talking about this past weekend, and kind of the theme of what we were just talking about today is it's more than just inside the lines. It's more than just like, the cage work or the bullpen work in the weight room. MP is so applicable to daily life. The side of the classroom you're sitting on, the parking spot you want to turn into, the way you drive, the walk, like everything. So it's so applicable to everything. I call him once a day and I'm like, hey, I'm on a walk. Like I really feel like I'm bouncing off my extension leg and my flexion leg is sweeping all the way out to the side. Like I'll call him and I'll say like I am consistently tripping on my flexion side every single day. Like just something
I'm
random.
grabbing my Dunkin' Donuts
Yeah.
bag pronated.
Yeah.
Like,
Just something like that every day where it's so applicable to daily life and that it has that crossover between life and then the sport that we play. So that's why I think it's so unique and amazing. So uh, overall,
Yeah,
you can see
yeah.
how it's a
Why?
system.
That's what's so cool about being observable is I have the most aha moments when they don't know you're testing them, or they're in habitual, things where that's the coolest part is like, or even when you're doing some of the assessments, they don't know what you're testing for, but it comes out this. So those things, even watching my daughter, knowing what her extension flexion leg is, getting her first little scooter, and she's scootering on it on her own, is like seeing which leg she's trying to find out which she's more coordinated, and boom, it's like that. And it's like those are the coolest little things of like I always sit on the left side of the plane without fail. Like, or what you do. Those are always the coolest thing because then you have relatability and buy-in to the fact of things that you're not forcing on someone. And so yeah, I agree with those. Those are cool things for sure.
No doubt. No doubt. You guys got anything else?
Man, that was a quick one. I mean, that's all we got today. Well, I guess it did it go fast?
Yeah, it flew by.
It did.
That's because the witch was talking more today.
That's right.
Yeah. Um, nope, I'm good.
All right. Awesome. Awesome. Well, until next time, appreciate you guys. Keep following along and we appreciate you guys. We'll talk soon.